Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Researchers Radio Live. I'm your host, Joe Kiernan. We are also hosted by Dave Stinnett and produced by Tim C. And forgive me, folks, my voice may sound like I'm running through a late run through puberty, and it's only because I'm just getting my voice back, and it's still up and down, and all the ins and outs too of puberty. And we have a good show tonight. We have a fellow host here on freedomslips.com. Michael Parker hosts the Electric Pyramid, Fridays beginning at midnight, or if you're on the West Coast, Thursday beginning at 9 p.m. And he has just completed his fourth show, and all four are fantastic. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for asking me to come on tonight. I appreciate it.
I was just looking for a reason to talk to you, you know. Dave's also here. Tim C's here. Dave, how are you this evening?
Good, Joe.
Tim?
How's everybody doing?
Amazingly well. We're doing good, buddy. So, Dave, Mike just finished up his fourth show. And, Mike, I do have to tell you, a few of your programs really are still resonating with me, especially the Weird Scenes one that you had just done.
Yeah, that was.
I think that guy's really uncovering something really monumental that I think it's really just the beginning of it.
I agree with you. Tonight he's doing a book signing in Hollywood at Duck Soup, which I would have probably gone to, but you asked me to be on the show, so I was more excited to do that as well. But I think that he's got something really interesting. I mean, I love the music of the 60s. I love popular culture. I love rock and roll. And yet something has always seemed quite strange about it. And I live here in Los Angeles, and I have lived here for going on 20 years. And I had never heard of the observatory laboratory up on Lookout Mountain. And it's very strange. I know some people will look at it skeptically and say that someone's just putting together a lot of points, but I found it very interesting.
Yeah, I could see it going both ways.
Yeah.
However, it's interesting. I know the one and only house that my boy Jim Morrison lived in Los Angeles was on the same road.
That's right.
Was at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, it's right there behind Laurel Canyon Market.
Right behind the market. That thing's still running strong too.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah, man, I've been in there before.
And it's weird because I didn't mention it during the show the other night because it wasn't about me, but I actually worked for the Zappas for a while, and I came up in the music business, and I've had the good fortune of working for some interesting people, eclectic companies, and for 2 years I did a stint working for Gail Zappa, the widow of Frank Zappa. Right. And I wouldn't want to get too much into to disclose personal details, but yes, they were unusual people. I was coming from a more traditional music industry background, whereas she and her children were coming from 30-odd years of living on the mountain with the legacy of Frank Zappa and 80-some-odd albums and all that would entail. So their points of view and my points of view on how to sell records and how to sell merchandise were different. So at the end of 2 years, I moved on to another job. But I've got to say that while I was there, I made friends. I was actually making a record of my own at the time, and I used some of their musicians. So I have no regrets about having done it, and I'm still see them occasionally here or there around town, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff about the whole Laurel Canyon thing. And I used to work at a record store here in Hollywood, and a lot of these people would come in, and a few months before Gene Clark passed away, I'm pretty sure, and this is a long time ago, but I'm pretty sure we did an in-store with him, and the in-store was poorly promoted. And this was right before, this is about the time that the Byrds were inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he would die mysteriously just a couple months later. And I just remember because we did that in-store, and I actually called one of my buddies the other day and said, hey, wasn't that Gene Clark that we did the in-store with? Because at the time I was just working and I was so busy, and I just moved out here. So I wasn't into the Byrds either at the time. But I just remember that it was very sad to me because hardly anybody came.
Right.
And he seemed like a tragic figure, and he was one of the primary movers and shakers behind the birds, and
Yeah, the
he would
Birds are a
die.
big part of the movement and all, believe it or not.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
they were pretty much the first band to jump out of there. But then we got back to that point where we're talking about guys like David Crosby, who had this crazy near royal bloodline, and then even Graham Parsons, who people here in LA just worship. He came from an extremely rich family as well. He was not some pauper. He was getting like I think he had a, what's the word I'm looking for? He was a trust fund kid, and I think he was getting like $100,000 a month or something. It was insane. And this is in the '60s, and he was putting up his band, and so a lot of these people, not only did they have families that came from military intelligence backgrounds, they also had a lot of wealth. So it's a very strange thing, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book. And anytime I can talk about rock and roll, I always like that. So.
It's just been on my mind. So many things. You think so many other things that come up and how they could fit in. But there was one thing I wanted to ask him, but it was completely off topic. Just the only thing that was any relation to it was that it was more or less a military installation within LA city boundaries.
Yes.
And I was just curious as the famous battle over Los Angeles of the UFO lights that took place. I know that military installation, the shovel went in the ground to put that place up somewhere right around that time.
Yeah, I think so, because Battle of Los Angeles was what, February '42, right, guys? Isn't that?
I believe you're correct.
Sounds
yes.
right.
Okay.
Yep.
So I believe that this installation was then, I think they broke ground on it around 46 or 47, which of course is, 47 is Roswell. That whole thing just blew my mind, because I'm kind of a conspiracy junkie. I like to read a lot of things. I don't believe everything I read, but I'm a curious type. I'm a Scorpio. So it's like I'm always kind of believing that people can be dark and weird. And yet I'd never heard of this laboratory at all.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, where help me out here. It's been a while since I've even been to LA.
Yeah.
Lookout Mountain in regards to where Griffith Observatory is.
Well, it would be west of that, because where Griffith Observatory is, that's where the Hollywood sign is and everything. And so this would all be west of that, but it's along kind of the same mountain ridge essentially, but it's west of that.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, is that like the same area like Lowell George and Randy Newman? Is that the same gang they used to run with in that same canyon?
You're exactly right, because Lowell George, I believe, and it's weird because when I was working for the Zappas, even though my brother and I were Zappa fans as kids, working for Gail, I never wanted to get too personal with her because it was my job. I had a brand new daughter. This was right after 9/11. I was unemployed for almost a year right after 9/11 because I was working for Virgin Entertainment. I'd created an internet radio station for them. And then a month after 9/11, they canned us all. So I was a new father, out of work. So when I got the Zappa gig, I felt very lucky. And so when I would deal with Gail, I didn't want to ask too many questions, even though I was dying to. So I was not even aware that Lyle George came out of the Zappa circle. But yeah, you're right. He was part of the Laurel Canyon scene.
You had Robert Palmer. I mean, you had a lot of heavy hitters coming out of that. I mean, I'm a Little Feats junkie, so
absolutely.
So Lowell's like my man. So
he was fantastic, and he actually comes up in the Weird Scenes book. Just briefly, it's weird. I didn't get to finish the book before we had the show. There was 3 or 4 chapters left to go, but yeah, Lal George was part of that. I mean, most of the people, the Eagles were part of this. Most of these artists that you've heard of were part of that, and that's why I asked him about Burt Bacharach as well at the end, because certainly he was not a rocker, but he was, a major LA fixture at that point. So yeah, a lot of the people that were even remotely involved with rock and roll in Los Angeles at that time had done some time around the Laurel Canyon scene, and it happened very, very quickly.
Now, Dave and Tim, when I had first met Mike, it was in Los Angeles, and it wasn't too long before 9/11. I think it was just a few months, so maybe September or October prior. No, it couldn't even been that long. it was just a few months really, but more or less, I was we have a mutual friend named Jeff,
Yes.
and I was at Jeff's house, and Jeff was not home, and I was doing a few things for him. At the time, Jeff was making a lot of music videos,
Hmm.
and I've been helping out more or less at one degree or another, and was at his house where some editing was being done, and I got a phone call from Jeff, and he said, I'm driving around here on my way home, and I see this thing in the sky, and I'm not sure what it is, but I'm doing my best to follow it, or more or less to keep it in sight as he's driving along. And he gave me a good idea of where it was, and he said, I'm going to be there in just a couple of minutes. See if you could run up onto the roof and see if you could locate this thing. And a friend of mine's doing the same thing. I said, sure, no problem. And it's not your normal phone call, that's all.
No.
At least for myself, at the time. And I said, hey, buddy, no problem. Jeff's not one for blowing smoke around. So I said, sure, man, I'll run up there and I'll take a look. So I'm up there on his rooftop. And within 5 minutes, Jeff arrived, and so did Mike Parker.
Hmm.
And we're up there on the rooftop. We're quickly looking around, and boom, right there, I'm looking at this thing, and I couldn't answer what it was. Honestly, it just it looked rectangular sort of shape to me. But I was looking right at the mountains that he was just describing, the Hollywood sign and Griffith Observatory, and this thing was only halfway down the mountain.
Yeah.
It wasn't higher than the mountain, and it was moving vertically from left to right, but it was slow and it was steady. It didn't look real, is what it looked like to me. It looked like some sort of projection, and then it moved beyond the mountain range, and then it looked like it went behind it. And my God, man, I was astounded. I couldn't believe what I had seen, and then that's when I got first started talking with Michael Parker and meeting with him. And I mean,
That was our first meeting.
that was absolutely incredible, man. It's still
Yes.
one of the profound experiences I've ever had
This was
relating
the
to anything
daytime, right?
insane. Yeah,
This
it was
was-
daytime.
this was-
Absolutely.
This would be late afternoon because I came from work, and our friend that Joe's talking about, Jeff, is one of my best friends, and Jeff and I would always talk about UFOs and ET and things, and that was we were actually introduced by another mutual friend, but the moment that he and I discovered that we both had this mutual interest, we became super tight. So we were always talking and about the subject, and so one day he's driving around town and he blows in the call to Joe, he blows in the call to me, and so I'm thinking this was probably in the spring, and I'm thinking this is probably between 5 and 6:30 p.m. because I'm thinking I left work and drove to his house at that point.
It's probably about right because I probably woke up about 3 hours before that.
I remember, Joe, I remember when this happened, you actually told me about this over the phone. And what I've always wondered, I always wanted to ask you, but it just never came up. It was the middle of the day. Well, as Michael
Right.
said, it was,
The sun was up. That's right.
early
Yeah, no
evening.
doubt about
It
it.
was
But-
bright.
You were just describing it as it was halfway down the mountain. Was
Yeah.
the background actually the mountain, or was it the sky?
The background was the mountain.
Well, check this out. I think that Jeff, he shot some footage of that, and I believe that Jeff ended up going on Jeff Rents shortly after about that, because I was just saying to Jeff, I was like, hey, man, you know what? You ought to, send that footage in. And I think that he ended up doing a brief interview with Jeff, with Rents about that footage.
Interesting.
And listen, I don't want to sound like a party pooper. In retrospect, I have a theory about what it might have been, but let me say for sure, I do not know what it was. Joe, it seemed to me like it was also kind of morphing into various shapes.
Yeah.
Do you remember that part?
Yes, sir.
And it was a light color. So here's my theory on what it might have been. And here again, let me clarify. I do not have an explanation for sure. This is just what I think. I think that it may have been, when you'll go by a car dealership and they've taken a long string of balloons and tied them in kind of a semi circle, and there's maybe 100 balloons. That was my theory afterwards as to what it might be, and maybe it was contorting like a worm or a snake as it went through the sky. But that being said, I still don't know what it is for sure. And at some points, I think Jeff's footage made it look like it even went into a Y shape at one point. But yeah, that was how Joe and I met. So it seems like it was meant to be.
I have to look at Jeff's video. It's been a long time.
I know. And hopefully he still has it. I mean, he was out. We were out in Joshua Tree just a month ago.
That's awesome.
And we were hoping
jealous.
to see some. Yeah, we were hoping to see some things. We were talking about you, and we didn't. We saw a lot of planes that night. We didn't see anything unusual, but yeah, I mean, we're still all over it, and love to talk about.
I hope it was good talk about me.
Absolutely.
In Joshua Tree, I know anything goes.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Right, of course. I'm mentally challenged.
Yeah.
So, Mike, you know what I was going to get into, man? Since I have you and Dave here, you two are like my main UFO guys on each coast. And all too often, it's like, at least from my point of view, is the UFO community or discussions, it's like there's like a great barrier splitting the country in half. And all too often, the conversations don't meet on each coast. And, there's a lot of things that happen on the West Coast we just don't hear about here on the East Coast, and vice versa. And we were hoping to go back to some basics. Like I was hoping to, what I do have, Mike, since we're here on this topic, I wanted to play an audio clip of the original CBS News broadcasting of the lights over Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty interesting when you hear it. Not only is it absolutely hilarious the way people talked in the 1940s, but it's actually a pretty good news report.
Absolutely.
Because, they were straight shooters at the time. News came in and they read it right off the wire. And there was, this was early radio per se. And it's interesting to hear how things change in time. Even just a week later, it still happens today, as we know. But before I go any longer here, let me play this clip here of the 1942 battle over Los Angeles, and then I'm going to get your opinions on this, guys. Alrighty, I'm going to cue it here. Sorry about this, gentlemen. Video clip of the original CBS News broadcasting of the lights over Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wednesday, February 25th. Once again, Columbia's correspondents in world capitals and the fighting zones in the Western Pacific are ready to give you the latest news direct by shortwave radio.
And now for news of our own West Coast, we take you to Los Angeles and the report of Byron Palmer.
Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area shortly after 3 a.m. Pacific wartime this morning. The anti-aircraft guns began barking during a blackout ordered by the 4th Interceptor Command at 2:25 a.m. The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach. Army officials declined to comment on the possibility that the object might have been a blimp. However, it required nearly 30 minutes to travel some 25 miles, far slower than an airplane. Watchers on the rooftop of the Columbia Broadcasting Building in the heart of Hollywood could plainly see the flashes of guns and searchlights sweeping the skies in a wide arc along the coastal area. Concussion of the shells could be felt in downtown Los Angeles, 15 miles away. U.S. Army planes quickly took to the dark skies, but whether they contacted the object has not been announced. Army officials say they will not comment until they receive a full report of the action. Although some watchers say they saw airplanes in the air, semi-official sources say they probably were the U.S. Army's pursuit. Several observers say they saw one or more planes spotlighted by 20 or 30 searchlights. The object moved southward, presumably over Huntington Park at the western edge of Los Angeles, and on southward to about Long Beach on the coast. By 3:30 a.m., observers said the object appeared to be over the south of Long Beach. Searchlights closely followed the object down the coast and kept it centered in their glare. Shells frequently could be seen bursting near the object, but none appeared to hit it. The shooting stopped about 3:30 a.m. The shooting brought warfare to the front door of this city of 1.25 million population for the first time since December 7th. Already it was alert to the presence off the Southern California coast of a Japanese submarine which had pumped 25 shells into an oil field north of Santa Barbara Monday evening. Because of the presence of the submarine, a 3-hour alert was ordered at dusk last night, and civilian authorities stood at their posts while the Army and Navy continued their search for the submersible. The evening alert ended at 10:23 p.m., but another was sounded at 2:22 a.m., and the blackout followed within 3 minutes. It covered Los Angeles County from Santa Monica to Pomona. At 2:27, all Southern California radio stations were ordered off the air, except those in San Diego. Approximately 20 minutes after the firing died down, the ship returned and headed westward from Long Beach toward Santa Monica. The guns went into action again, hurling round after round of shells at the object. The second barrage appeared to be closer to downtown Los Angeles, since watchers could hear the concussion of the guns more clearly, and the flash of bursting shells was brighter. Then the ship disappeared for the second time over the ocean. We return you now to CBS in New York.
Pretty cool. Guys, you still there?
I'm here.
Just getting a little feedback. I don't know if it was from the player. Sorry, guys. Well,
Hey.
that was pretty cool. We had someone, our friend I Need Coffee, in the chat room pointed out something I find absolutely hilarious, and they're correct, is they refer to the time that the incident took place as Pacific wartime, as opposed to Pacific and Eastern. It's Pacific wartime. That's what it was back then. I always find that hilarious. But what's the deal with that, guys? I mean, how could an incident so large take place over a major city, as they said, a population of 1.25 million at the time, to this thing really not getting an answer? I mean, what could this thing have been? Dave, what's your side on this?
Same stuff we've been filming for the last 30 years, Joe. Same stuff you have off your coast. I mean,
Right.
Honestly, I mean, other than maybe North Carolinas and some of the interior of Pennsylvania, the East Coast, by and large, we don't get, like, I mean, we get flaps, but most of the action is like Missouri, Arizona. You know, you could say California, but California's got a boatload of military installations, so you never know what you're getting out there.
Yep.
And frankly, you know, a triangle is a terrestrial airframe. In space, there's a vacuum, so you don't have any drag, so you can have whatever kind of design you want, you know, floating through space. But those things, it's the same crazy magnesium bright burning orbs that we've been filming for years, and they evidently got a hold of one, but they shot a lot of shells at it and nothing seemed to penetrate. So,
And they shot thousands of shells at that
Yeah,
sucker.
they did. I think there were injuries as a result of that.
yeah, on the ground, yeah.
And because some shrapnel hit some people. I've watched people on television talk about that event that were there at the time, and see, these are actually the kind of UFO events that I really like. And this thing, listen, when you start pulling out artillery
Right.
and shooting at something, okay, now we're all in. And now this is a real thing. And that one shot, the iconic shot that we've all seen, which I believe was a result of the fact that it flew over MGM out by Culver City. I mean, if you look at that thing, I mean, come on, man. It looks like a flying saucer if you enhance it a little bit. And anything that you fire artillery rounds at for, going on an hour or whatever it is, and it makes no no dent in this thing, and it just keeps going back and forth. You have to ask yourself, what is this? And I think that the conventional answer was, again, they trotted out some kind of a balloon answer for it. But I love this story, and I think there's a darn good chance it was a UFO of extraterrestrial origin.
I would like to think by this point, our military's artillery, all these artillery shells, would at this point be advanced enough to take down a balloon, even if not a direct contact.
Word.
I would like to think so, especially if you could see it from, where did they say, the CBS building? That's at that time was Hollywood and Vine, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
You know what I always wondered about this is, if you look at the the few photos that are available on the if you just do a simple search for it, there's so many spotlights coming from all these different directions. How long was this thing in the air? Because it
was there for a bit for them to get a beat on it. Let's put it that way.
They would have to, because there's got to be
Tim's got a good point.
A dozen or so spotlights.
They were able to get a good amount of these super spotlights in a triangulation format.
That's right.
Yeah.
They mobilized artillery. They mobilized spotlights. They started shooting at the thing. And I do understand that it was World War II, but at the same time, you've got to get those things into position. You've got to get your teams doing the routines that they would do in such a thing. So it's like this was not a light situation. This was a major, it could have been they thought it could have been the Germans, could be the Japanese, God knows what it was. They definitely took it seriously, and they fired, I believe, and I hope I'm not exaggerating, but I think they said they fired off like in the thousands of rounds.
Yeah, I believe it was over 3,000, if I'm not mistaken.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, over a major city, and you're firing off live rounds in the United States of America in the 20th century. That's a big deal.
Right. I mean, over residential neighborhood.
Yes.
I mean, like Venice Beach, I remember seeing a few interviews with people from the beach who were saying their parents were covering the children, where there's
stuff was coming through the roof and went through smashed garages and all kinds of stuff.
And naturally so, with 3,000 rounds. I mean, you're on a battle scene at that point.
Yeah.
And I would like to think if this was a Japanese craft or anything pertaining to World War II, we would have heard of this by now. It's 70 years out.
Jose Escamilla was doing a movie on this Battle of Los Angeles, but he was showing me some of the enhanced pictures he has. But I have to admit, I kind of err on the side of conservancy. It looks like a bright blob to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see where they would say it kind of looks saucerous. But that in itself, the fact that they waffled that thing and it didn't take fire, or the stuff went through it, or however you want to put it, tells us something of what's going on there.
Yeah, and then here's something, there was something going on in my house, right, as part of that radio broadcast was going. They mentioned something about a submarine, which I didn't. What did they say to that?
Yeah,
extent?
And they said it lobbed a lot of shells too over on set. Yeah.
A few months prior, there was a reported Japanese submarine off the coast.
That's right.
That was firing shells on an oil field.
Okay, so that's what they were talking about. They weren't talking about something that happened concurrently.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. I have to say, I mean, right, I'm sure you guys heard about this thing that happened out here recently where somebody supposedly found a alien base off of Malibu.
Yeah.
I heard it mentioned.
Yeah, and here's the deal. I don't. It looks interesting, but there's certainly a lot of UFO activity that has happened within Southern California. I was actually part of a television program that never ended up airing, looking at some UFOs in San Diego a few years ago. But it wouldn't necessarily surprise me if something is going on in the water off of Southern California, but I have no hard proof of that. Do you guys remember a couple of years ago when there was it a Chinese missile or something? Something got shot off. It was this kind of, who's shooting off missiles off the coast of California? And that was a very strange thing. I don't think actually that was really fully explained either.
Well, it's funny because
the one that was fired off and landed off the coast.
I'm kind of stream of consciousness at the moment, but there was this weird missile fire.
Yeah, it fired away from the coast of California, and everybody's like, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
I actually ended up talking to a contact. His wife actually programs the computers to the F-14s and stuff like that, but he works on the missile defense systems, and he just kind of looked at me when I asked him about it, and he goes, "It was one of ours."
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Well, I'll tell you
but
guys
I know everybody was panicking because they're like, "What the hell is a Chinese submarine doing off our coast, lighting up missiles?" And the answer to that is nothing could get close to the United States that would have that kind of firepower.
Right. It was highly suspect. I'll tell you something that happened to me out here. And I've never mentioned it on one of the shows, but I guess it was the late 90s, probably around 96 to 98, something like that. And one of my best friends came over to my house. I lived in an area called Silver Lake, which was very close to where Joe and I met. And then we were headed west on Sunset Boulevard. I think we were going to a concert or something. And he, this is one of my best buddies for a long time. We used to be in a band together. He's not really into this, but he knows that I am. And, so he kind of, we don't really talk about it. We just talk about the other things we do have in common. So we're headed towards Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard, headed west towards the ocean. And it was either Sunset or Hollywood Boulevard. They run parallel to each other. But what happened was, I'm guessing this is 9 to 9:30 in the evening. And all of a sudden, going across the sky from north to south is what looks like a missile shot from Vandenberg. Because we get a lot of those, and if you know about them, you can watch them, and they kind of have a telltale look. And
cool.
at that point, I wasn't really. It was in one of my phases where I wasn't really all about the UFOs, and so we're driving towards this show, and my buddy looks over to me. He's like, "Jesus, Parker, it's like you would have to get in the car, and then we see this UFO on the way to a show." And I was like, "Yeah, that is pretty weird." And it was quite. It was very dramatic, and it was white, and it was billowy, and it just shot across the sky really quickly. Well, the next day, I called Griffith Observatory, and I said, "Hey, you guys, don't laugh at me. I just wanted to check, because you're the only people I know who to really ask before I call the news. Was there any missile activity coming off from Vandenberg or anything last night?" And the guy said no, and he goes, "It's clever that you had asked, because we do have access to all those records. Since we have the observatory, we keep up with who's shooting what off at what times, because we have the telescope, and it's part of the information that we want to have." Long story short, he claimed that nothing had been shot off that night. Nobody knew anything about it. Nothing ever came out on television about it, in the press or anything. And it was just one of the times that I've seen strange things in LA. Nobody ever talks about it. Never heard anything about it again. And it was just one of the. I've only had a handful of UFO sightings in my life, and I can't say positively what any of them were, but that was one of the stranger ones.
It's funny because L.A. Marzulli in his Watcher series,
yes,
I think it's Watchers 1, but he's saying him and his wife are having dinner somewhere's off on some restaurant off the PCH, and they hop on, and it's about the same time frame as you're saying, 9:30 or so, but they're rolling down the highway there, and they get one of these things burning up in the sky, and they're sitting there gawking at it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen one of them, which I know for a fact was from Vandenberg, and this would have been around 2005, 2006. It was just tremendous looking. It was fantastic. It almost had this crazy halo effect around it. But this thing that I saw was literally burning through the sky, and it was kind of burning unevenly. It was very strange. It was white. Another thing that I've seen here in LA, and here again, this is when my wife and I first started going out, and I used to work in the music business a lot. So at that point, we would get to go to various functions. And again, we were headed west towards Santa Monica, and actually towards the Culver City studios that the photograph of the Los Angeles craft that we were talking about earlier was actually shot from. Anyway, there was a record release party there that night for Janet Jackson, and this would have been the early 90s. Anyway, so I'm driving my wife and a couple of her friends headed west, I believe on Pico, towards the ocean. And we're going to this party, and all of a sudden, this green light just comes down out of the sky at like a 45-degree angle. And I'm like, "Are you guys seeing that?" And we all saw it. And, I had a carload of girls, so I wasn't as attentive as I probably should have been. But that's another thing that I've seen. And then the weirdest thing that I've ever seen, and I've been wanting to tell you guys this, is in the late 90s, I started to look into the chemtrail situation, and because I grew up.
I believe you were the first person who ever mentioned the topic to me.
Yes, and because I grew up on a farm in Texas. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, and the closest little town to us of any size was Abilene, Texas, which has Dyess Air Force Base, and they had B-52s flying in and out of there, and they would fly over our family farm at a very low altitude. We would see them as kids, and part of the reason I'm so into space is that, you know, when you're on a farm, you got a lot of time to look straight up, and I was just completely into space and the Apollo missions and everything. But anyway, so in the late 90s, when I started kind of reading about the chemtrail thing, I was like, yeah, this just isn't right, man. Why have I never seen this before? This can't be. I would have noticed this before. And so I kind of got obsessed with it for a while. And it would have been 2006. And yeah, there for a while, I kind of blathered on and on about it. I don't really talk about it much anymore. But in 2006, I was flying home from Australia. And my wife is from Australia, and I was actually cutting a record at that time in Australia. And this would have been October of 2006. So we're flying in. I was flying home separately from my wife and daughters. And so I'm flying into LAX, and this would have been about 12 o'clock, about lunchtime. And when you're flying those long flights, most people are asleep. Most people are literally and metaphorically asleep, you know, and so the windows are half open. And at this point, I'm still kind of all about the chemtrails and always looking around, trying to see what I can see. And you guys, I swear to God, on a stack of Bibles, here's what I saw. I look out, it's about 12 o'clock, as I said. We're almost to LAX. We're almost to the beach. And I'm looking at some chemtrails, and I kid you not, I see a silver ball, a silver sphere out beside one of these chemtrails, and we're level with it. Wow. I had seen these types of things from the ground before. I'd seen them silver, I'd seen them white, I'd seen them black beside chemtrails or contrails, whatever they do turn out to be. But that's so, you know, I've kind of just given you my few what I would call UFO sightings of my life. And what's funny was when I saw this silver ball, I'm looking around and I'm thinking, do I cause a fuss or and everybody else, you know, they're asleep. Nobody's looking around. Nobody cares. And we landed, and that was it. And to this day, I have no answer to what it was, but it is what I saw. It was a silver metallic sphere beside a chemtrail.
That's remarkable, because I know even at a good distance, you could usually tell if something is somewhat of a plane. You know, you could.
That's right.
Usually the wings or the tail is a little bit of a different color, and it throws off the proportion of it.
This was a sphere.
It could actually be one of those situations where you actually have a weather balloon, because those weather balloons carry, packages underneath of them that gauge all different types of stuff. So if they're spraying the stuff in the air, they could let off one of those things to gauge if they've got the, air to goop mixture, proper.
I agree. Is this Dave?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I agree with you 100%, because I think whatever it is, yeah, it was man-made without a doubt.
Yeah, we had a guy that speak at one of my monthly meetings a couple weeks ago, but he's got a new movie coming out about the chemtrails, and I've seen the video. What on earth are they spraying and stuff like that? And it's this is happening everywhere, and everybody's noticing. I mean, all of New Jersey talks about it. It seems like all the time, at least in the area that I'm in, central New Jersey. But people talk chemtrails all the time. So I mean, people are aware that something is being sprayed in our atmosphere.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't talk about it too much anymore, because it's like at one point I think that all this kind of hurt my career. I was doing a show. I did 100 episodes of a show called Dark Matter for another network, and this was before Art Bell had a show called Dark Matter, and I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I did not know that what's the gentleman's name? George Eklund?
Oh, right.
George Ecker?
Yeah.
Anyway, I was not aware that he had a show called Dark Matters. So I didn't rip it off from him. I just wasn't aware of it. But anyway, I did 100 episodes of this show. And, I was at that point in my life, I was pretty outspoken about a lot of things. And then I went through a difficult point of time after that. I mean, so that's kind of why I laid back for a while. Things kind of didn't go well after that. I did 100 episodes of that show. Then I got hired by Discovery to do another kind of investigation show, and then it got canceled kind of mysteriously before it ever aired. And the executive producer was the same guy who was doing Mythbusters, and that was just about the toughest point of my life from about 2009 to about 2011. It's like I could not get arrested, And unfortunately, I think part of that was, Joe, from talking about these various subjects. So I don't really talk a lot about that anymore. Plus, I know a lot of people who just think that the subject is just crazy. And, you're never going to win certain people over on certain subjects. So it's not even worth going there. And at one point, I was a bit evangelical in all this because, you get passionate about something and a lot of information comes out and you think, well, gosh, everybody would want to know about this, right? Actually, they do not. And they don't want to hear about it. And now you're making them mad. And the other thing about the whole chemtrail thing, it's like the longer it goes on, the more I have to admit, I really don't know what's going on. But like the UFO subject, I do feel that most likely, yes, this is what we think it is. Unfortunately, we don't have the hardcore hardware evidence that it's going to take to prove this to the disbelievers. Plus, the media is not on our side either, and most people believe anything that they hear on television, unfortunately. So it's sometimes I don't even want to breach these types of subjects with people.
Are you?
Well, they hit that really hard, Mike. I mean, when people started first realizing it, the trolls came out like monkeys everywhere, and they were like, they're contrails, and it's just like, hey, listen, I know the difference. I grew up around airplanes and airports, and contrails don't do that. They dissipate. These do not dissipate.
That's right. And the other weird thing about the contrail chemtrail thing is and I would try to show it to people. This is L.A. and I think Scott Brown was talking about it on his page a day or two ago. You begin to notice, what the flight patterns are, and with the chemtrails, I would always notice they were running along the coast from kind of northwest to southeast, and I'd point them out to people, and then, you would also see a legitimate contrail. And there is no question that the two things are different. One is much longer and lasts a lot longer than the other. And yet there's people out here. I mean, one of the local weather people the other day was going off on, the chemtrail Looney Tune people and saying that, this was really just the result of increased air traffic and, various weather atmospheric conditions. So it's one of those things where I still am curious in the subject, but I don't really talk about it that much. I probably just talked about it more just then than I have in the past couple of years.
I'm still
upset. And that's when you go, yeah, but why do they make a checkerboard patterns in the sky like that?
Exactly.
I'm still upset, Mike, that everything on TV is not fact. You still blew my
surprising, isn't it?
I'm devastated.
I know, it's unbelievable.
How can they do that? I'll change it up for you, Mike. Since I made you return to the old chemtrail topics.
Yeah.
Moving on to also in the 1940s, and it was mentioned earlier, we had the Roswell incident. And It was 1947, and obviously we really don't know too much more about it now than we did then. And I'm not one for beating a dead horse. That's just not my style. But I do have the original press release of that also that I wanted to play. I wanted to, it might shine a little more light onto just the way things that were happening in that time.
Sure.
If you guys don't mind, I'm going to cut to that. I wanted to try to fit this in before the end of the hour because, Mike, I wanted to ask you a little more on the Marfa lights when we come back from the break. So let's see let's play it here.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection. Late this afternoon, a bulletin from New Mexico suggested that the widely publicized mystery of the flying saucers may soon be solved. Army Air Force officers reported that one of the strange discs had been found and inspected sometime last week. Our correspondent from Los Angeles and Chicago has been in contact with Army officials endeavoring to obtain all possible late information. Joe Wilson reports to us now from Chicago. The Army may be at the bottom of all this talk of so-called flying saucers. As a matter of fact, the 9th Atomic Bomb Group headquarters at Roswell, New Mexico, reports that it has received one of the discs which landed on a ranch outside Roswell. This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brizzell was the man who discovered the saucer. Colonel William Blanchard of the Roswell Air Base refuses to give details of what the flying disc looked like. In Fort Worth, Texas, where the object was first sent, Brigadier General Roger Ramey says that it is being shipped by air to the AAF Research Center at Wright Field, Ohio. A few moments ago, I talked to officials at Wright Field, and they declared that they expect the so-called flying saucer to be delivered there, but that it hasn't arrived as yet. In the meantime, General Ramey describes the object as being of flimsy construction, almost like a box type. He says that it was so battered that he was unable to determine whether it had a disc form, and he does not indicate its size. Ramey says that so far as can be determined, no one saw the object in the air, and he describes it as being made of some sort of tinfoil. Other Army officials say that further information indicates the object had a diameter of about 20 to 25 feet, and that nothing in the apparent construction indicated any capacity for speed, and that there was no evidence of a power plant. The disc also appeared too flimsy to carry a man. Now, back to Taylor Grant in New York.
Well, that was interesting. I love that one because they're still reporting it as a flying saucer recovered, and that news broadcast was a week after the incident, where when it was originally reported, I know it was ran in the news that a flying saucer had crashed, and then it quickly had turned to a weather balloon. Mm-hmm. Am I mistaken here, guys? Because I'm not a UFO expert by any standards, nor a historian of the topic. But they were just talking about shipping that thing off to Ohio.
Yeah.
That is what happened?
They shipped it first to Carswell in Fort Worth, and that's where I believe it was Ramey set the guys down and said, "Listen, we're this flying saucer thing that's not no pun intended, but that's not going to fly. So we're going to have to they put down some whatever that stuff is and claimed at that point that it was a weather balloon. And I believe if the legend is correct, then the rest of the debris or craft and would have gone to Wright-Patterson. And isn't that how it went?
Dave,
something to that effect.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what they can verify is the fact that it went to
I think it was just Wright-Patterson was the only one I had heard.
Yeah, it went to Wright-Pat,
yeah.
And that's where everybody knows they can track it to. So they're not dragging nothing back to Wright-Pat. Chuck Missler, who was in the defense industry most of his working career, he does a lecture on this type of UFO stuff. But he states, and it's true, that even after all this time, those records for Roswell are still top secret and under wraps. You would figure that if it was anything that was happening during that time period that was, even if it was military related, terrestrial related, it wouldn't be a big deal for them to report it now.
Yeah. I mean, so we are coming on 70 years.
Why is it still under, why is it still under, under wraps?
Well, I think also the GAO was asked to look into that by a senator or congressman whose name Chef or something from New Mexico, yeah. and the GAO saw a lot of those records were now just gone. They were gone. They couldn't, obviously they're not gone. They're somewhere.
Yeah.
But you cannot for like 2 years on each side of that. I think all the records are gone. So we just don't know exactly what happened. I will go on the record here, guys. I will say, I actually think Roswell might be real. And one time I was talking to Daryl Sims and Jolene Harrington about it, and it seemed to me like, I was like, look, here's the thing that puzzles me about Roswell. If you have the technology to travel interstellar space, and then how in the heck can you not navigate a rainstorm, and even radar to me it was highly suspect. And I was just like, how does that work? I mean, how are these guys, how's their craft so flaky? And I said I remember if I said it directly to Daryl. I've interviewed Daryl a few times. I like Daryl.
I know Daryl.
And I can't remember if I said it to him or Jolene, because Jolene works with Daryl. But I said, look, don't you think that if that was real, that they probably crashed it on purpose? And then they both lit up and they're like, dude, that's exactly what we think. We think it was, an intel job. It's like they intended to crash the thing so that we'll take the craft and whatever it is back into our own hands, and they'll have an end. So listen, I don't know what happened, but I actually have a feeling that it was real. And so I really like the Roswell case. I was actually asked to do another America Declassified episode about it, but it didn't end up happening, and I kind of tried to talk them out of it because here again, the problem, and I work in the reality television business, so I'm not trying to bag on it entirely. I know we're coming up on the eight hour, so I don't want to go too long.
Buddy.
Let me just say this one thing. They talked to me a couple of months ago about maybe doing another episode for America Declassified on Travel Channel, and they wanted to do a Roswell thing. And I told them a long time ago, I was like, dude, don't do another Roswell thing. Don't do another Area 51. There's so many interesting things out there that we can do. Don't do those. And so when they call me about another episode, they want to do a Roswell thing. And listen, I'm all ears, so, but the problem was the guy who was calling me about it, what they wanted to do was do the angle on the test dummies. And
Right.
I was like, now you realize, I said, I just got to tell you, the test dummies were after the incident. This is there's proof of this. That was 52, and I can't remember the name of the two programs. But I was like, look, I could send you the documents that show the whole test dummy thing didn't even happen at the same time. I said, and he goes, well, when did this happen? I said, when did it happen? I said, well, it happened, the date was July 8th, 1947. And I was like, if you guys are going to do this show, I said, you're going to have to do your homework. It's like, I'm glad to do that for you, but listen, you should really know when the event happened. And, and you should just know that.
There was the Project Blue Book release, and then everybody pretty much just laughed that out of the park. And then they started making up these excuses. And every time they came up with an excuse, somebody would research it and say, you got your dates wrong again. And the test dummies were exact, example of that one.
Yeah, I think that started in 52. But anyway, so that we didn't end up doing the show, and I probably burnt my bridges on that. But it's just like, there's a lot of interesting types of stories out there on a milieu of subjects, because I'm not just interested in the UFO thing. I'm interested in a lot of things. And but it just bummed me out. It's like, because I'd already told them, I was like, let's not really do that subject. And then they came back to me with that subject and then didn't even have, 2% of the facts right.
That sounds about right. But you need to at least get the dates right, for God's sake.
I think so. I think that's a fundamental.
Well, guys, we'll be back in just a few minutes. We take a 5-minute recess break here. Don't go too far. We'll be right back with Michael Parker and the rest of the crew. Welcome back to Researchers Radio Live, hosted by myself, Joe Kiernan, and Dave Stinnett. Excuse me, folks. My voice is starting to slip a little bit, but I think I can make it. I know I can. I know I got it in me. We're joined tonight by a fellow host on the program, Mike Parker. And Mike Parker is a man of many hats, although you really don't like wearing hats that much, do you, Michael?
I rarely wear a hat,
but you have many of them.
I think so.
Yes. Tim C., are you there with us?
I'm here, Joey.
How are you, Tim?
I'm doing well. I wanted to remind our listeners that Revolution Radio is 100% listener-supported radio. If you want to support our host's efforts, please go to freedomslips.com, click on the Support Us link, and you can choose between any number of ways of supporting the show. There's the monthly support club, or you could go and pick up one of the seed packs. Single seed pack, $60, 23 varieties. Then there's the jumbo, which has 54 varieties, and the community, which is the big one, has 135 varieties. All seeds are non-GMO, non-hybrid, and can be grown, replanted. And all packs, they include a clear instruction manual and survival ebook. It's a pretty good way for
a Boy Scout manual too.
That's right, and a Boy Scout manual.
You could survive just about anything. Nuclear catastrophe with a Boy Scout manual.
I'd like to see you try that one, man.
Maybe that's stretching it. the cough medicine has me a little bit loopy, man.
Right, right.
Right, but I do know the seeds. We could store those things up to 25 years in the freezer.
That's right. They
Yeah.
they definitely can be stored for 25 years. They come with a nice Mylar pack that's reusable. You can open it and close it. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have enough Mylar in our lives, do we? We need more Mylar. I'm gonna tell my wife. Pick up So we've got Mike Parker here with us, my good friend Mike Parker from an undisclosed location in Hollyweird.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike, I wanted to pick your brain a little more, man.
Okay.
In regards to the Marfa lights in Texas. This is a topic, again, until you brought it to my attention, I was completely unaware and unfamiliar with it all in all. Was this the area in which this was taking place? Was this nearby where you grew up?
No, it was about 6 hours away at least. I grew up out near a place called Abilene, Texas, and I grew up on a farm, and my dad, realized we were going broke really quickly, so he got into the oil business. So I grew up working in the oil business, and I spent some summers working in Odessa, Midland, which is closer. But the Marfa lights were something I'd heard about my entire life, and I'd actually never been to Marfa. I mean, as you guys know, Texas is a huge state, so
Yes.
I had actually never been to Marfa, and when I was approached about this project, I jumped at it because I was like, man, I would love to do that. And I was already hip to the whole idea of earth lights and spook lights, because outside of Abilene, they have a similar thing called the Anson lights. But make a long story short, the Marfa lights are famous, and I was really excited to get the opportunity to take part in that. And when I was approached to do it, I had enough background off the top of my head to tell the folks what I thought it was. And to this day, I believe that it is plasma coming up out of the ground. And I think, 95, 97% of the time, people are seeing car headlights, they're seeing refractions, because you have to go to Marfa to understand how extraordinarily strange this place is. It's almost like it's disorienting. It is a desert surrounded by mountains, and there are dormant volcanoes there, and it's just a very, very strange place. And because you're also about 5,000 feet above sea level, this is the highest town above sea level in the state of Texas. So you've got this weird air, you've got this strange kind of curved earth appearance of the prairie encircled by mountains. And it's very easy to believe that the car headlights that you are seeing are, in fact, these strange lights. Now, that being said, the Marfa lights predate automobiles. And I've got to say that when we did the Marfa lights episode, that's when I met my good friend Scott DeShane. And, his belief was that, and he's still very much researching this idea that there are organisms in the atmosphere that could be bioluminescent. And I appreciate his work, and he is a great guy. He's completely sincere, and that's not my personal opinion of what it is, but I love the fact that he is putting himself out there and looking into this, because it was something that I was not really aware of. And when you talk about at first, when I first heard about it, I was like, well, that's crazy. That's silly. And I didn't really want anything to do with it. But the more that I would talk to Scott about it, the more I realized, well, that's actually, a really cool, interesting idea. And at this point, man, I've been through every facet of the whole UFO thing. One minute you're looking at UFO books, and the next thing you know, you're listening to David Icke, and you believe that the Queen's a lizard. And it's like, so, I've been through the whole thing. And like I've said before, you guys, I don't want to appear jaded or a party pooper, but I'm more skeptical than ever. I believe in the general idea, but on a case-by-case basis, I'm more skeptical than ever, which gets us back to Marfa lights. So the one thing that bums me out about that episode is the gentleman that you see me speaking to at the very beginning is a man named James Bunnell. James Bunnell spent almost 10 years in Marfa on his own dime. And this is a man who lived in San Diego for a while and worked for several defense companies. He comes from an aviation background. And if you look up his book called Hunting Marfa Lights, I already thought that Earth lights were plasma. But in my mind, this dude has solved it. if you read this book, he explains how the plasma comes up from the ground, why it comes up from the ground, and then the photochemical process that happens in the atmosphere that causes these things to light up and behave in such a way. And I wish that they would have spent more time on him, because I found his ideas fascinating, completely plausible. And in the case of Hessdalen, in the case of Brown Mountain Lights, in the case of Marfa, I really do think this is plasma. And now, what's interesting about that is that if you take this to the next level, I would put forth the idea, and this gets back to Scott DeShane, and even Scott was kind of skeptical at this, but what if plasma is intelligent? What if plasma is another form of life? What if, we are looking at what is life through a smaller scope than we should? So, this is purely speculation on my part, but I think that it's possible. And listen, if you watch plasma, it even behaves like it is alive because of the way that it, the little free particles within it kind of tend to move around, and they can be affected by the magnetic fields that surround it. But I do think that James Bunnell deserves a lot of credit. I would encourage anybody who's interested in these subjects to read his book, Hunting Marfa Lights, because he explains the whole thing the way he sees it. And to me, it's incredibly plausible idea, and I think he solved it. I wish we could have spent more time on that on the show, because he was an interesting guy. He certainly put in the man hours, and he did it without help from anybody. He did it all on his own dime, and he actually grew up in the Marfa area. Interestingly enough, another thing about Marfa that we didn't get to talk about, this was another place where it originally started out as an air base. In the 40s, it was a huge flight school, and at one point they had 5,000 people at this large air base in Marfa, Texas. And when they shut the air base down, the town nearly collapsed entirely. Today, if you go out there and you stand at the Marfa Lights viewing station and you look across the horizon, you are actually looking across what used to be this giant air base. And now you can see it from above. You can see some of the concrete slabs that are still there, but everything is gone. And it was just interesting to me that, here's this town that kind of started out initially as a railway watering station for, I believe, Southern Pacific, and eventually became a major flight school in the early 40s, and took this little town from nothing to a big something in the course of about 5 years. Then they shut it down, and the town nearly disappeared entirely. Now, if you go to Marfa, it's become this, hipster central. There's a lot of very good art in Marfa. And because a guy in the 70s, who I can't remember his name, I think it was Phil Judd or something, he was a postmodern artist. He came through Marfa, bought some properties, and said, you know what, this would be a great place for me to set up some galleries. And as a result of it, Marfa now has a second life because of its popularity in the art scene, and they have a music festival, and people have become hip to the Marfa Lights. And so I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that experience, and I really think that James Bunnell wrote a wonderful book which should get more play from anybody who's interested in the Earth Lights phenomena.
There's a few people that mentioned, especially Karen Kay here, in relation to the Brown Mountain Lights. Are you familiar with the Brown Mountain Lights, Michael?
Yes. And Scott DeShane has actually gone there. And here again, I think that the Brown Mountain Lights, I think the Hessdalen Lights, I think the Marfa Lights are all a result of plasma coming up out of the ground. I'll go on record. That's what I think it is.
It's virtually the same thing, bioluminescent to a degree?
No. It's plasma. So it's the fourth state of matter. I don't know about you guys. I'm old, but when I was a kid, there was only three states of matter. There was gas, liquid, solids, right? Well, now there's the fourth state of matter. And actually the fourth state of matter, which is plasma, is actually the most common form of plasma in the entire universe. Our sun is plasma. The aurora borealis is plasma. It's simply a state of matter in which the positive and the positive and the negative particles are kind of in this free-floating state. They're not in their typical orbits, so they exhibit this strange behavior. But it's a common form of matter. It's just, I don't know why all of a sudden we're calling it the fourth state of matter. We didn't before. But when I was doing my research for all this, I kept coming across this idea, and people call them Earth lights and spook lights and this, that, and the other thing. And here again, I was approached, the same show that I was talking about earlier, where I was approached to do the the San Diego UFOs, we were also going to do a spook light episode. So I had already done my research on this type of stuff like about 4 years prior. So when they call me, I was like, well, yeah, here's what I think it is. And, Scott and I went round and round about it, because Scott still thinks that it's something else. But I love Scott to death. And I think that his work is actually going to lead to something that he doesn't even think it's going to lead to. I think that, listen, I'm skeptical of the idea that there are, large invertebrates in the atmosphere. However, I am not skeptical of the idea that there are life forms in the atmosphere that we are completely unknowledgeable about. And if we can look at the atmosphere as a viable biosphere, then I think there's things to learn there. And I think I always tell him this, and I think he's kind of like, thinks I'm nuts, but I think his work could potentially lead into something else than what he thinks it is. And he's not the only guy who's looking at aerobiology in that respect. But so yeah, that's my take on the Marfa lights. I do think it's plasma, and you're lucky if you see the plasma, because 97% of the time what you're seeing is car headlights or just refracted light. Because the other thing about it is the way the place is and the temperature inversion. Literally, light flashes around in different ways in that atmosphere that, you're not just seeing car lights, you're seeing stacked light. And I forget what James calls a couple of these things, but they're Fatana mirages. But there's just a lot of sophisticated. Nice. Yeah, there's a lot of sophisticated light mirages that are happening in that area. And if you drive around it, you're like, this is the weirdest place I've ever been. It looks like you're on the surface of the moon or something, because it's extremely arid. It's far west Texas. You've got these dormant volcanoes. And that's the other thing that can create plasma, is when you have this type of geological activity occurring under the ground, it can create plasma, which comes up out of the ground. Also, when you have large sheets of rocks, especially igneous rocks, under great pressure, then it begins to act like a battery, which is the power that can electrify the particles which make the plasma. So it's a strange combination of things that can cause this, but I do think that could be going on. And I would even put this out here as a possibility, Joe, because whenever I see the stuff that you guys are shooting, and then I also hear about the booms, I wonder if there's some type of strange natural phenomena happening there as well. I know they're saying the booms are unrelated to seismic activity, but I mean, where else could this stuff be coming from? To me, it has to be coming from the Earth in some way. And then the fact that you guys have all these lights, I don't know, it's just...
Mike, although that may be a viable theory, what I've been filming in the field for the last 25 years is not that. Have you ever whacked one of these things in a really active area with a laser?
No. I have not.
No.
Yeah, it pisses them off.
Right.
And
it's just one thing I have not done.
People, and I made the mistake of either asking Allison Cruz, and she was whacking these things with a laser, and she had a green one do a controlled drop behind her. People saw it, and she just about pissed herself basically. But this is live stuff that's aware of what you're doing, and it will defend its little trip, whatever it is. But you see these things pop in.
Sorry, guys, I think we're getting some feedback there. But I'll tell you, in regards to lasers, that's something I haven't done.
Charles Lamoureux, a friend of the show.
I know Charles.
He's been on several times. He has a video on his YouTube site that he clearly shoots a laser right up at one of the ones he was filming. I believe that one he was filming with night vision. I could be wrong about that.
Well,
but it reacted. It definitely blinked.
I agree. Now here in my state is South Carolina. Anything goes, like in regards to fireworks. I mean, you could really, I can go to my corner gas station and buy the largest mortars available in America, and it's incredible. First of all, you can buy them at gas stations. Secondly, there's no laws on these things. I could fire off mortars here in my backyard that will possibly break people's windows, but last year they did ban lasers. They did ban using lasers because a lot of people were shining lasers at these lights in the sky. I'm not one of them. It's not something I've done.
Well, guys, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that all UFOs are this. I'm, as Scott puts it, I'm an all of the above kind of guy, and I think there are myriad things happening in the atmosphere right now. And so, I guess where I'm coming from, I'm trying to look at as many different possibilities of what is happening, and then just from my own experience and from what I think is going, it's all pure speculation. So I'm not saying that all UFOs are plasma.
Of course.
I think it's important what you said, though. I mean, it's very true that if some of the things that are being seen are plasma, it's good to know that and be able to decipher that from what the other phenomena really is. So, you know, the work that you've been doing and your theory, I think it's important.
Could this be?
And here's the deal. I can't claim it because, I mean, I would encourage people to read James's book because you know, he's the one who really did the work. I'm just following up and researching it, and it made a lot of sense to me because recently somebody said something about Hessdalen where they were just, you know, certain that there's no way this is plasma. I'm like, well, how do you know? What kind of
they're the leaders in plasma physics over there, and they have the term that is. And again, I mean, when you provide outside stimulus, these things react to it. And Ted Phillips, guys like that, know exactly what I'm talking about. John Burroughs from Rendlesham knows exactly what I'm talking about. The two phenomena are not related. I mean, I understand tectonic plates and that type of stuff, but you're not getting intelligence from
because we also have light.
Plates,
what do they call them? Lightning balls. They call them. It's a similar
ball lightning.
That's basically what he's talking about. You know, you get a tectonic shift, you get great release of energy, and you get these things that may or may not come out of the ground. And
ball lightning actually is not really plasma. That's kind of a misconception. I think the Chinese actually just recently did a study where they were actually able to finally photograph ball lightning, because ball lightning is extremely rare.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to say is, listen, all I'm saying is I'm not saying that all UFOs are plasma, but I do think that in the case of the Marfa lights, I think that that's what you're looking at, and I think that is the case of things that you're looking at in certain locales. So that's all I'm getting at.
I think that's very fair.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what I always wondered about plasma, and especially like with the Marfa lights, after watching the show that you had done, it interests me that the way that the movement, I mean, it's not like they really move that much, but they move very slow. So it's plasma does have weight to it, and the intense heat, I would imagine, would make it float. I don't know, but it just.
Well, that's the other thing that's weird about it. It doesn't seem to have heat attached to it, which seems strange. It's like, how could there be a chemical process without having heat? And then the other thing that's weird about it, and Bunnell, he's a scientist, so he explains this far better than I ever could. But you know, it does respond to the electromagnetic fields around it. So I'm just putting it out there. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I still believe in the ET hypothesis. Where I have to draw the line is that I don't get super worked up about every piece of UFO footage that I see, and
that's a wise thing.
That is.
So that I like I said, I don't want to come across as the bad guy or anything, but it takes a lot to get me fired up these days. I still believe in the general premise. I think it actually makes far more sense than that they would not be coming here. So my interest in the UFO field, the things that I love are a case like the Los Angeles thing that we were talking. Listen, the situation in Stephenville in 2008, January 2008, that fascinates me. I mean, we have radar records that show this is tangible. There's no argument. This is real. Something was flying back and forth across the state of Texas. So those are kind of the types of UFO stories that I'm really interested in. And I love Jacques Vallée, and I love a lot of different people have different ideas. But for me, once we get into the interdimensional aspect, and I'm not a nuts and bolts guy strictly, it's just the older I get, the more like, man, you know, show me the money. I need something tangible here that is beyond argument.
What about the incident that took place with UFOs or just a large group of unknown lights flying over Washington, D.C. in the state capitol?
Amazing.
That fighter jets chased.
Amazing.
The same stuff, Joe, you have off your coast. Again, the same stuff we've been filming forever. You know, and in that particular incident, a friend of mine, Rob Swiatek. Rob is like the Washington flyover man. I mean, that's his MUFON,
Right.
bread and butter. But they're the same things that we're filming, and they send jets in, and these things surround the jet. So you're not talking some plasma ball coming up from Earth. You have things that disappear when the jets come, and when the jets go, they reappear, and they actually take one jet and they surround it. That's intelligence. So we got to. I think we need to kind of suss some of this stuff out. Yeah, maybe the Marfa lights may have been from the geological area, but this is in that same ballpark, and this doesn't meet the same criteria.
Well, here
Okay,
we
check
have.
this.
Go ahead, Mike. Please go ahead.
Check this out. Here's another thing that puzzles me about the UFO phenomena is the way that it has evolved over the years. I mean, at different times, man has seen different types of objects. And, in the 1880s, 1890s, we were looking at these things that were, people thought they were airships. We're seeing cigars. You go back into the ancient alien type stuff, and you're seeing, even in the Japanese, you're seeing things that look like conventional craft. And now it seems like we see more objects that are just simply made of light. And I'm more fired up about things that are unambiguous, things that are unambiguous objects that have mass and scale and symmetry of some sort, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Well, I was actually talking about this subject to like a bunch of think tank type UFO people this weekend, and everybody kind of came to the same conclusion of sorts, which is that we don't really get flying saucers anymore. And I was talking to Ted Phillips about this very thing, and it was just like somewhere around 2000, like all the trace evidence, all the UFO pie pan stuff stopped. But we don't really know anybody who's ever gotten like really real authenticated flying saucer film. So that kind of raised a flag, and there's a lot of pictures out there, but a lot of pictures were debunked. So the one thread that we know we have is, even from World War II, are these orbs, and I think that's what set us all off from the extraterrestrial hypothesis to the interdimensional hypothesis, is that we were filming something in the field, and what MUFON and the rest of the UFO groups were presenting wasn't what we were filming. They were talking about flying saucers, and nobody that we knew got any decent flying saucer film or got any decent pictures of flying saucers. But these things that we see flying around all the time, we got plenty of that. So I think that's kind of where we jumped ship a little bit. I think there's a lot of disinformation put out there. Roswell is a solid case, on the other hand, but you don't know, disinformation and all that military stuff was still going on back then. So you don't know if they were planting seeds or what was going on. But
right.
Well, guys, in fairness here, what I'm going to play right now is in relation to the lights over DC. This was the press release issued about that happening, and it's spoken by General Samford of the United States military.
It's a good one.
Interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to...
I had to interrupt and just say, I love it how whenever they play something serious in the 40s or 50s, they put in a nice orchestra sound behind it. I'll let it continue.
Identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage. That is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate to any conceivable threat to the United States. We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any agency of the United States. Air Force interest in this problem.
So, God, that very interesting in many ways, especially how he ends it all by saying it's in no way, shape, or form related to any top secret government events. So, besides the music that makes it seem like it's harmless and peaceful, as opposed to playing some seriously hard tuba sounds to really get you going. It's quite interesting. I mean, of course, it was something that was well known again at the time, and it had to be addressed. It required a press conference, especially since it was well known, even not just within military circles, that fighter jets were scrambled from Delaware to track it once these lights appeared on the radar, because this event over D.C., if I'm not mistaken, took place on 2 concurrent weekends.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the fighter jets from Delaware, when the blips appeared on the radar, the jets were scrambled, and the blips on the radar disappeared. And when the jets landed, the blips reappeared. And it's mind-boggling today. I mean, I understand it's basic radar, but it's basically still the same radar we trust in today to land planes. And, it's an extraordinary event to take place over D.C. I mean, it's restricted airspace then and now, and it was a large group of lights. I mean, there was a lot of them in the pictures I saw.
That's right.
Quite a bit. Let's see it here. We're going to switch it up for a minute here. We'll get the last half hour of the show. Dave, my man, what do you have going on this summer, my man?
Actually, in a few weeks, I'm going to be headed out to Arizona to do a little UFO hunting.
Awesome.
There's a fellow researcher out there, Ken Champlain, who's going to take me on some of his favorite spots and show me some of the alien artwork on the rocks out there. And so looking forward to that trip.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
I'd like to be one of our.
He's one of our wounded warriors, so we're going to go out and do some UFO hunting.
He's a wounded warrior, you say?
Yes, he is.
Wow, that's great. Tim C.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
hoping to be doing some filming by your house, Mike Parker. I don't know if you remember, Tim C. Lives in the Pine Bush area of New York.
That's right. That's right.
And so I'm going to take full advantage of his location. And
Well, that was a solid case.
yeah, I'm going to turn his house into a studio per se.
Mhm.
He's unaware of that at the moment.
Well, it depends on what week in August, because I actually am going to Virginia in August, so maybe it'll work out. I can stay here.
Yeah, I know what week you're going to Virginia. Are you going? Are you going to make a return to the Edgar Cayce Museum?
I was actually thinking of coming and seeing you, believe it
Yeah,
or not.
I
I
know
was
it.
thinking of taking a road trip.
I'm hoping you do.
And yes, I'll definitely go to the Edgar Cayce Museum for a day.
Mike, did that strike a nerve with you, Parker?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been there. I would love to. I mean, that's another thing that I find very interesting is the UFO ET subject is probably the first thing that piqued my interest as a child. But, you know, psychic powers, prophecy, ancient history, these are the types of things, you know, many subjects. I mean, listen, I love cryptozoology. There's not much on the kind of left hand of kind of what's the word? Well, just anything that's weird, I'm probably interested in it.
That works.
And
Well,
so Casey, absolutely, very interesting case.
I've always been a big Casey guy for a very, very long time, and it's one thing I've even said here on the show before. When even earlier when we were talking about is this something earthquake related, you know, in this area here where I am, you know, or natural phenomenon, things like that that's going on. it does concern me because we don't have any extinct or active volcanoes, and we're really not in a geological spot where there's earthquakes. Overall, I understand they can happen anywhere, but Edgar Casey was one of the people who said, when the Earth does begin to change, that we're all expecting to happen eventually. The first thing that would happen would be the east coast of the Carolinas would slide off into the sea, and I'm immediately in that area, and it's for someone who took Edgar Casey so serious my entire life. It's just completely ridiculous that I would move to such an area.
I'll send you a pair of swimmies.
From the way he describes it, I'm gonna need a little more than swimmies, but I might need a whole arc.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Casey's an awesome guy, man. What an exciting, serious amount of volumes this guy has. Others had put together. He really didn't do any of the writing; he just did the speaking. But
that's correct.
But that is some library he's got, man. I would definitely go there. It's actually, if I were to ever return to Virginia Beach, that would probably be the only reason why.
Well, the reason I go there on a regular is because I get a good deal.
Right.
There you go.
But
you get a good deal if you just continue down here.
The library itself is pretty good because there's a lot of, we'll just say esoteric volumes that you can't find other places. There's you could spend a full day just roaming around and then say to yourself, man, I could have spent a week here in the library itself. But it's an interesting place. It's a good trip.
Yeah, I like Casey a lot. He was a solid character. I like how his whole premise was really ultimately for healing.
Yes,
more or less. It wasn't financial. The guy put all of his chips in the bank and to build that hospital that was there.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that swear by his remedies, and a lot of his remedies. A lot of people will say, well, that's more or less. Let's just say a witch's tale, a wives' tale, this and that. The old if you got a fever, you put a empty glass over your chest and say a prayer or whatever. But
that's ridiculous.
I'm just saying there are a lot of people that look at his remedies that way. But he talks a lot about herbs and they have booklets on just about every ailment you could think of, and what he's pretty much. The truth is that there's been a lot of ailments that have come about since his death, but they did a pretty good job of identifying what he was talking about and attributing each to. And it's hey, if it works, it works.
Exactly.
I agree.
For some people, it does.
For a headache, I just go to the old bong hit. That's just me. That's
a start.
Good. It's just exactly. It's just the start. But I'm a big fan of the wives' tales and the witch tales. I do tinker around with some of the older alchemical treatments. As Tim knows is no secret. I like to think that's why I still have all my hair and I haven't gone bald yet. We'll see how it turns out, though. I still have a way to go. I might have lost my voice through it all, though. But Parker, man, what do you got going on the show this week? Tell us what we're looking forward to this Thursday.
This week, I'm
Pacific time.
Yeah, I'm going to be needing your help because I was trying to read some of this today, and like I say, I'm interested in a lot of different subjects, and not all of them I know a lot about. And Freemasonry is one of the things that I'm interested in, but I don't know a lot about. And we've got Robert Sullivan IV coming on to talk about Freemasonry and symbolism. And I know he was on you guys' show. And I think a lot of people, one of the things that interests me about Freemasonry and things like that is just the place of ritual in a 21st century society.
Right.
And interestingly enough, Sullivan and I are fraternity brothers. I was in a fraternity in college, and we were members of the same fraternity. I did not know him; he was a different chapter. But so, you know, and I went through a ritual, and it was actually one of the few truly mystical events of my entire life. And so that's one of the things that interests me the most, is just this place, this thing in a modern society still having, you know, the ritual only means, it only has the power that you kind of give to it.
Right.
And I've never told anyone what happened in it, because the minute I do, then it no longer has any power. I mean, all you have to do is go on the internet. You can find probably every fraternity or sorority or secret society ritual that there is. But the power is in the power that I give it, and the lessons that I learned from it. And so that's one of the things that I'm interested in talking to him about. And then the other thing, of course, is like, listen, everybody thinks that, you know, or a lot of people think that secret societies rule the planet. You know, maybe the Masons run the planet. And he touches upon that in his book. And he says that, no, that's not really what's happening, unless I'm misreading him. But he certainly kind of understands how people could think that. So I'm interested in the subject, and I'm looking forward to talking to him, and I hope that I can do the subject justice. And I know that you're very much into these types of topics, so it's going to be a great show.
Yeah, I mean, he's an awesome guy. He was a great guest from the standpoint of a show.
Yeah, our chat room was ablaze when he was on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a topic that most people can familiarize themselves with, depending which side of the argument. That's the whole thing with me, is I feel there really is no argument. I don't understand what the problem is, and I don't like saying.
I tend to agree.
It's people's ignorance, because it's really not ignorance. I understand that a few powerful people, or a larger few powerful people, have made wrongdoings here on Earth or to humans, and they might have been Freemasons, but that doesn't mean all of them are bad. What I really appreciated about Mr. Sullivan is that, he is in the craft of Freemasonry, and he has gone through all the levels and the steps and rituals. However, he's a student of. He hasn't gone through the rituals and the steps just to progress to the next level. You know,
he's a gentleman about it. When you
course.
ask him, you can ask him any question you want. He didn't try to avoid any questions at all.
Well, I mean,
he bought into the fact that it wasn't what it was being billed as. You know,
right.
So.
Right.
I mean, because it's really my interest with it specifically is not so much today. It's more in the beginnings of it, and I do understand how they became established and why they had to be a secret society, if you will. But you know what a lot of people don't realize is that the same people that started Freemasonry and are ultimately the same people that began Rosicrucians and the original Illuminati. If there is an Illuminati today, that's irrelevant to this topic. But you know, these people were coming out of Eastern Europe, and they were Greek speaking originally, and so what people don't understand is that this is the same reason why we have Greek fraternities in colleges today. Sure. When universities started here in this country, there was still secret societies in colleges and universities that were teaching older ways, and it became known as Greek fraternities. I mean, today it's a little different. It's about what sorority they team up with and things like that, which is all cool. But it wasn't, you know, I'm more into the origins and what drove the inspirations to have to do such things.
Well, I like the idea that somebody had their hands on the wheel, man. It's like I'm impressed that somebody, when we were founding this thing, was paying credence to ancient knowledge. And you know, because I mean, you look at politicians today on whichever side of the aisle, and it's like they are all narcissistic, bumbling, I don't want to say fools, because some of them are actually smart, but I mean, they are not behaving as if they are guided by any form of higher power, although they may claim to be. Right. And at least with the founding fathers, with Masonry as their foundation of some knowledge that has been preserved and honored for centuries, I actually like that idea. So no, I'm with you. I do not think that Freemasonry is necessarily some great evil. I mean, listen, I think the Illuminati would probably be more like bankers. So it's like, I don't think that I'm not afraid of Freemasonry, and I do find it very interesting, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think back then what they called it was called a classical education, and you
Yes.
got everything.
Of course.
And that
Humanities.
includes, yeah, and that includes the biblical texts, and all these guys had it. So there was evidently some sort of moral compass within the operation. I mean, and as anybody knows, you give mankind a good thing, and we'll bitch it up every time.
Yeah, usually. Usually.
So go ahead.
The problem with it is the original teachings were you take the knowledge and you're supposed to use it to better everyone. You're not supposed to use it for yourself. You're supposed to look out like a shepherd. The shepherd, is he looking out for what's best for him or what's best for the whole flock?
How was it used in its time? Did only the rich people have use of whatever that technology was in that time?
Well, no, unfortunately, when all of these began, these were people out of the Eastern Roman Empire that had the knowledge that had been passed on, dare I say, back to the mystery schools of Egypt. A lot of them will say such things, and it appears to be the case. I mean, they do have those texts, all these old texts that we have going back, that's where they come from.
Well, most people don't realize that the Eastern leg lasted a whole 1,000 years longer than the Western leg.
That's right.
So
I mean, when the Eastern Roman Empire fell, they would have said, it's a sad thing that this is happening. We've stood now in secession for 2,700 years, as the school of teachings had gone, and so they had to go underground. But they started from the bottom again, and through working with like-minded people on like-minded goals, they achieved such things as taking back America. And a lot of our founding fathers were Freemasons. I mean, in a way, I wish a lot of these early Freemasons were our politicians today.
Without a doubt, man.
But just because we have Freemasons in politics today doesn't mean it's the same thing.
For one reason alone, they believed in the power of the individual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They understood it. It wasn't.
You can even look at some of those writings at the time, and George Washington is talking about the Masons in New York, and he doesn't seem to word it very kindly about the Masons in New York, because there were different versions of Freemasonry going on at the time, so you don't know who was in on what and who wasn't.
Sure.
You're right, but I mean, you'll find out, Parker, from Mr. Sullivan, is he'll tell you still today the difference between Freemasons here in America is if ultimately it's the Dallas Freemasons or the DC Freemasons is what it all boils down to.
I'm aware of that, and there's also clandestine portions, offshoots, and it's like, look, something like Skull and Bones. I've got to buy the hype on that, man. I just don't really see anything good coming from Skull and Bones. So it's like some of these secret societies, I just don't see anything good coming from. I mean, listen, if you got John Kerry and George W. Bush both in the same club and they're buddies and hanging out and laying in a coffin and all that nonsense, I just don't. I don't see a lot of good stuff coming out of that.
No,
stealing a Native American skull or whatever. It's
that's Geronimo's skull.
Supposedly, yes.
Yeah, supposedly. Either way, they got to give that back.
I think so. So I mean, listen, I'm not trying to give a pass to secret societies, but I think in the case of Freemasons, they have a strong heritage with some true alchemical and mysterious knowledge that they've been safekeeping for a long, long time, and I think there's a lot to learn from that. And anytime that you have reverence for a higher power, whatever you want to call it, I think it's a good thing.
It is, in my opinion. But again, it's in whoever's holding the wheel, right?
Certainly.
That's really what it boils down to. I'd like to think that the people that do hold the wheel in Freemasonry, they are still holding to the true ways, the old ways of the teachings. To them, it's about the teachings, and I do understand as you climb the ladder of the understandings how the world seems it comes into light a little bit easier, where you could actually you could grab the wheel yourself for a little bit, if you will. You could it gives you the knowledge of understanding how you're actually in control of things. Don't just follow the leader. Don't just do what everyone tells you. And it helps you understand it, and it gives you the first step to build on, and they take it from there. And I'm not saying it's for everyone. It's not personally for me. I have not become a Freemason, but I talk and work with a lot of them because of what I study, because of my interest in the older texts, and some of them have been very, very helpful to me. There's a gentleman here at the station in the chat room, Patrick English, is a Freemason, and he's an excellent guy to bounce ideas off of. Oftentimes, I'll get hung up on something, and sometimes there's answers out there that just haven't been written. You can't go and find a book on some things, and it's hard to explain exactly what I'm referring to. But sometimes you get stuck and you say, there's no point of reference to go to. I have to talk to someone. I have to ask someone who's been through this before, because understandings are very hard to put into a book. So it takes steps, it takes lessons, and I understand that was the whole premise of Freemasonry. And so I'm really happy with someone like your guest this week, how he is a student of the craft, and I like how that is what drew him in the beginning too. It wasn't I see a lot of these guys in powerful places. I want to be one too, and he's if I'm not mistaken, I believe he studied at Oxford, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
He seems like a genuinely curious person, and I think that's what we would all have in common.
Yeah, he's a scholar and a gentleman, that guy. I'd love to have him on again. I really would. I know Tim enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a great show, man. It really was.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to have a few other good guests coming up, too. We're going to have a guest coming on in a few weeks who is basically speaking on the same thing, but directly focused on the Founding Fathers being awesome. Freemasons. And I'm going to have to I'm really going to pay close attention and try not to sound like too much of an idiot, because this person does fall in the top 2 percentile of IQ testing worldwide. So this person's got a good head on their shoulders. And, so IQ tests say. Yeah.
So you can't tell us who it is. You're just teasing us here, Joe. Is that what's going on here?
It's going to be the big holdout.
All right.
It's going to be a big holdout.
All right, fair enough.
I'm bringing in a secret genius.
All right.
The name is John Fishwick, is the gentleman's
Okay, name. Excellent. When is that?
When is it? It is it's next week's show.
Oh.
Next week's show.
Great.
We're going to have him on, and
that's appropriate.
And we'll see. We'll see what they have to say. Because I'm a big fan of the Founding Fathers.
Absolutely.
Also being Freemasons, because that's how they were able to pull this off so tightly, and with solitude. And I'm just saddened. In 200 years to some people is a long time, but ultimately it's really not. And we've come so far in a negative way, in my opinion, from these original doctrines set forth by the Founding Fathers. It was supposed to be, as we all know, I don't have to get into it, it was set forth in the plainest way they could, but it was supposed to be an idea and a role model for other nations. And somehow along the way, we've taken a lot of this, I'm not including myself, but a lot of these people in the powers that be have taken a lot of the powers for themselves and not for the people. And I hope we could find a way back on there, because, man, it's like I'm just afraid we're going to hit a point of no return of these original ideas.
You know what it is that people don't understand that republics last for hundreds of years. Democracies generally run for a couple hundred years, because it is mob rule. It is chaos form of government. So you have to ask yourself, in the great big scheme of things, why is everybody rushing to what everybody knows historically is a chaotic form of government? Yeah. Nobody's willing to ask the stuff that's sitting right out there, but everybody knows democracies historically are a chaotic form of government.
Absolutely.
Yet that's what we're trying to make the whole world. And it's just like something's retarded about that. I can't quite put my finger on it.
Yep.
I wish I had that answer. I don't know how it keeps happening.
It happens because
Routinely.
people in power don't want to let go of power. That's why it keeps happening. And they set themselves up in positions just like a chessboard where they play pawns against each other, and they create class warfare so they can pretty much confuse the masses and make us feel like, oh well, we're gonna keep our minds on one thing when in fact they're just going to start World War III or whatever it is they want to do.
There's so much shiny stuff keeping everybody busy other than their civic duty, which was keep an eye on the wolves, that the wolves have gotten a pretty good run on us at this point.
It's pretty sad.
I don't know if it's sad. It's discouraging. I mean, I really think if people got themselves together and really looked on these things, people really can take the power back. It's doable. It's just it's very convenient to just follow suit. People don't like it when laws change. They'll make a big stink about it, but as soon as it's taken off the mainstream news, 3 days later they forget all about it and fall right in line.
Yep.
Well, I'm probably naive, but one of the things when you asked me, Joe, if I would consider doing a show, and I wanted to do a show, and friends of mine were like, well, Michael, what are you doing this time? And I said, well, I think I'm going to be far less political. And the reason for that is that the minute that you become, and I'm actually very political, but the minute that you become political, you lose half of your potential audience. And I'm not a person who's necessarily on the left or the right. I take each thing on a case-by-case basis, and that includes people and personalities. So what I would like to say to us is that my hope is that by introducing people to provocative and new and interesting ideas, that helps them then break out of their typical way of thinking, which will then lead them to ask the other questions about the things that they've been told. And I guess that's what I would really like to do ultimately, is just to, inspire people to think creatively and think critically. And hopefully that will lead to a whole bunch of questions, not just about the things that we're talking on here. In a way, some of the things that we're talking on here are just the beginning of hopefully what could potentially be a larger worldview for some people. And you kind of have to inspire them and entertain them first, because if you hit them over the head with it, they just reject it outright, and then you're lost. So that's been my approach with this, is just try to hopefully get people to think in new, refreshing ways, because otherwise they've got us under their thumb.
Yeah, they sure do, and pressing hard.
Yeah. And they're counting on that. As long as they've got you looking this way and that way at all these various things, and you're cheering for your guy on your side, and I'm cheering for my guy on my side, we're not looking for any kind of middle ground. We're not thinking critically, because a lot of the things that the Bush administration did, Obama's also doing, and people, on one side or the other, they both hate the other one. And I'm not a big fan of either. But my point is, it's like, as long as their guy's in power, everything's hunky-dory. Well, guess what? That's completely non-critical thinking, and so I think if people start to think in a more questioning way, it's a good thing.
Great way to end it, Mr. Parker. Everyone, we have Michael Parker joining us tonight.
It was fun. Thank you.
Tune in for his show, The Electric Pyramid. It's technically on our schedule here at freedomslips.com, Friday at midnight. For anyone on Pacific War Time, it is Thursday, 9 p.m., 2-hour show. It's a brand new show. He's done 4 episodes now.
I'll queue up some UFOs.
And we'll be there, man. I'll be there.
That's right.
I hope you'll be there. And from Dave and Tim, myself, Joe Kiernan, thank you very much. We appreciate everyone tuning in. And check us out, freedomslips.com in the chat room. And stay tuned for Alchemical Connections. See you guys later. Thanks a lot, Parker. You're the man.
Hey, thanks, guys. I enjoyed this. I was very honored to be on.
It's honored to be honored, Michael. Buddy.
Thanks a lot.
Later, bro.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Hi, this is Bo.
And this is Rocco.
And the Bo and Rocco Show is here to offer insight into legal and lawful remedies. Our goal is to remain free and help others remain free in an ever-increasing police-like state. With the help of our guests, we try to answer questions such as what went wrong and what can we do about it.
So tune into Revolution Radio at www.freedomslips.com Wednesday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to listen to the Bo and Rocco Show.
You don't need to expect us.
We're already here.
Revolution Radio.
Every Tuesday evening on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, we present our goddess spiritual warrior, Kathy Bilski.
I command. I call to the architect of the universe's divine creators and ask for permission to quantum leap the world in all life forms on all planes and dimensions